September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
What happens when thousands of immigrant families in New York go to sleep thinking life is normal and wake up feeling like the ground has shifted beneath them? In a city built by immigrants, fear can spread overnight when rumors explode, policies tighten, and headlines start sounding like warnings. One new rule, one court decision, one government order, and suddenly people are asking terrifying questions. Can I still work? Can I still travel? Am I still safe here? Now here's where it gets even more intense. Many people are hearing that Zoran Mamdani is connected to changes that could shake immigrant communities across New York. Supporters say he is trying to protect vulnerable families. Critics say his moves could spark chaos, confusion, and a political firestorm. But what is really happening behind the scenes? And why are so many people panicking right now? In this video, we're breaking down 10 major law and policy changes fueling fear, confusion, and uncertainty for New York immigrants, and the truth about Zoran Mamdani's role in all of it. Stay with me, because some of these changes could affect jobs, travel, legal status, and entire families faster than anyone expected. Number 1. The truth about Zoran Mamdani. Before we go any further, we need to stop and ask one serious question. Is Zoran Mamdani really the man behind the fear spreading through New York's immigrant communities? His name is now everywhere. In political debates, in social media posts, and in emotional conversations happening inside homes across the city. For many people, just hearing his name attached to immigration issues is enough to create instant anxiety. That is because immigration is not just a political topic. It is about families, jobs, safety, children, rent, and survival. And when people believe a powerful leader is connected to major legal changes, panic can spread faster than the truth. But here is where the story becomes far more complicated. Zoran Mamdani is not simply the villain some people are trying to paint him as. In fact, many of his supporters believe he is trying to protect immigrants, not punish them. They see him as a leader standing against harsh enforcement and trying to make New York safer for vulnerable families. At the same time, his critics argue that his actions and public stance could create even more tension, political conflict, and confusion in an already unstable system. And that is exactly why his name causes such a strong reaction. Sometimes people do not panic because they fully understand the law. They panic because they feel something big is changing, and they are scared of what comes next. So the real truth about Zoran Mamdani is this: he has become a symbol of a much bigger battle happening in New York right now. To some people, he represents hope, protection, and resistance. To others, he represents chaos, uncertainty, and political danger. And for thousands of immigrants already living with stress and fear, that uncertainty feels overwhelming. That is why his role in this story matters so much. It is not only about what he says or does. It is about what his rise to power could mean for the future of immigrant life in one of the most diverse cities on Earth. Number 2. Expanded travel bans. One of the fastest ways fear spread through immigrant communities was through travel restrictions. For many families in New York, travel is not a luxury. It is deeply personal. It means visiting sick parents, attending funerals, seeing children, or returning home after years apart. But when travel bans expand or new restrictions suddenly appear, that simple trip can turn into a terrifying risk. People begin asking painful questions almost immediately. If I leave, will I be allowed back in? If my family comes here, will they be stopped? If rules change while I am in the air, what happens next? That is why travel-related policy changes do not just create inconvenience. They create panic, because one plane ticket can suddenly feel like a gamble with your entire future. What makes this even more frightening is the speed of it all. Immigration rules tied to travel can change with a government order, a policy shift, or a new enforcement decision, and ordinary people are often the last to fully understand what is happening. By the time the news spreads across WhatsApp groups, neighborhoods, and family phone calls, the fear is already growing. In a city like New York, where families come from every corner of the world, even rumors about travel bans can hit like a shockwave. A mother may cancel her trip. A student may delay seeing family. A worker may decide not to leave at all, even for an emergency. That emotional pressure builds fast, because no one wants to make one wrong move and lose everything. And that is what makes travel bans so powerful. They do not just control borders, they control emotions. They create a feeling of being trapped between two worlds, unable to fully move forward and unable to safely go back. For immigrants in New York, that kind of uncertainty can feel crushing. One policy change can turn freedom into fear almost overnight. And as we move to the next change, you will see that for many families, the fear did not stop at travel. It reached something even more immediate: the right to work and survive. Number 3. Shorter work permit validity. Now imagine finally getting the document that allows you to work, breathe, and provide for your family, only to find out that its protection may not last as long as you thought. For many immigrants in New York, a work permit is not just a piece of paper. It is the difference between stability and fear, between paying rent and falling behind, between building a future and watching that future slip away. So when the validity period of certain work permits becomes shorter, panic spreads fast. People immediately start worrying about renewals, delays, legal mistakes, and what could happen if their paperwork gets stuck in the system. In a city where the cost of living is already brutal, even a small disruption can feel like the beginning of a crisis. What makes this change so stressful is that it creates pressure from every direction at once. Workers fear losing income. Employers worry about legal compliance. Families begin asking how they will survive if a permit expires before a new one arrives. And the immigration system is already so slow and confusing that many people do not trust the process to move in time. That is where the fear becomes real. It is not only about a document ending sooner. It is about the terrifying gap that might come after. A missed deadline, one delayed notice, one small filing mistake, and suddenly someone who was working legally yesterday could be thrown into uncertainty today. That kind of pressure can keep people awake at night. And this is why shorter work permit validity hits so hard in immigrant communities. It turns everyday life into a countdown clock. Every month matters. Every form matters. Every delay feels dangerous. Instead of feeling secure, people are forced to live with a constant sense of urgency, as if the ground under their job could crack at any moment. And for families already carrying stress, debt, and fear, that kind of instability can feel overwhelming. But as frightening as work permit uncertainty is, the next change shook even more lives, because it struck at the heart of hope itself. Asylum. This story is bigger than headlines. It is about real families, real fear, and a future that is still being written. So now I want to hear from you. If you were in this situation, which of these changes would scare you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't hold back. And please support our work by subscribing to the channel. It takes us a lot of time, research, and effort to create these videos for you, and your support means everything. Also, make sure to watch our previous video right now because it connects perfectly to what you just saw. Number 4, the hold on asylum applications. For many immigrants, asylum is not just a legal process, it is a lifeline. It is the promise that after fleeing danger, violence, or persecution, there is still a place where life can begin again. That is why any pause, delay, or hold on asylum applications can send a wave of fear through New York almost instantly. People who already survived trauma suddenly feel trapped in another kind of nightmare. A system that stops moving just when they need it most. And in a city filled with newly arrived families trying to rebuild from nothing, that kind of delay does not feel small. It feels devastating. Because when asylum is placed on hold, hope itself begins to feel frozen. What makes this even more painful is the uncertainty it creates in everyday life. People waiting on asylum decisions are not just waiting for paperwork. They are waiting to know whether they can stay, whether they can work, whether they can support their children, and whether they will be forced back toward the danger they escaped. Every delay becomes heavier. Every unanswered question becomes more frightening. Families start living in a painful state of suspension, unable to plan for next month, next year, or even next week. In New York, where survival already depends on moving fast, finding work, and holding life together under pressure, a frozen asylum process can make people feel like they are drowning quietly while the world keeps moving around them. And that is why this kind of change hits so deeply. It does not just affect court dates or legal files. It affects the human heart. It turns relief into anxiety and safety into uncertainty. For thousands of people, asylum was supposed to be the road out of fear. But when that road suddenly slows down or disappears into confusion, panic grows fast. And as intense as that fear is, the next change struck another painful nerve, because it involved families who had already been waiting for a chance to reunite. Refugee admissions. Number 5. Refugee admissions suspension. For many families, the refugee system was supposed to be the final door to safety, and then suddenly that door felt like it was slamming shut. Refugees are not people looking for convenience. They are often people escaping war, persecution, violence, and unimaginable fear. So when refugee admissions are suspended or restricted, the impact is immediate and heartbreaking. In New York, where so many communities are built on stories of survival and second chances, this kind of change sends a chilling message. Families who were waiting for loved ones begin to panic. Parents start wondering if their children will ever arrive. Brothers, sisters, husbands, and wives are left staring at their phones, praying for news that may never come. And that emotional shock can spread through entire neighborhoods almost overnight. What makes this even more painful is that refugee families have usually already waited a very long time. They go through background checks, interviews, paperwork, screenings, and endless uncertainty, all while holding on to one fragile hope, that one day they will finally be reunited in safety. But when admissions are paused, everything becomes blurry again. Time starts stretching in a cruel way. Weeks feel like months, months feel like years, and for families in New York trying to build a stable life, that delay can be emotionally crushing. It is hard to focus on work, school, or daily life when the people you love most are still stuck in danger, still stranded in limbo, or still waiting for a chance that suddenly feels farther away than ever. And that is why a refugee admission suspension creates more than frustration. It creates deep human pain. It tells vulnerable families that even after surviving the worst moments of their lives, safety is still not guaranteed. It turns hope into anxiety and reunion into silence. In a city where family networks are everything, that kind of uncertainty cuts deeply. But as devastating as this change was, the next one brought fear to a whole different level, because it was tied to the border itself, and the message behind it was impossible to ignore. Number 6, border crackdowns and tougher enforcement. Even though New York is far from the southern border, what happens there can still send fear racing through immigrant communities here overnight. That is because border crackdowns do not stay at the border. They create pressure that spreads across the entire immigration system. When enforcement becomes tougher, when entry rules become harsher, and when the government starts sending a message that it wants to shut the door faster and harder, immigrants everywhere begin to feel the shock. In New York, that fear shows up in shelters, in legal offices, in crowded apartments, and in quiet family conversations late at night. People start asking the same painful questions again. Will it become harder to stay? Harder to apply? Harder to bring family? Harder to survive? What makes border enforcement so terrifying is not just the policy itself, but the message behind it. It tells people that the system may no longer see them as human beings in need of protection, but as problems to be pushed back, stopped, or removed. And that emotional impact is enormous. Even immigrants who have already made it to New York can feel their anxiety explode when they see tougher rules, stronger language, and aggressive enforcement headlines. Suddenly, every change feels connected. Asylum becomes more uncertain. Court cases feel more dangerous. Travel feels riskier. Families waiting for loved ones lose hope. The border becomes more than a place on a map. It becomes a symbol of fear, rejection, and instability. And that is why this kind of crackdown shakes people so deeply. It creates the feeling that the entire system is becoming colder, harder, and less forgiving. For immigrants already trying to survive in one of the most expensive cities in the world, that emotional pressure can feel crushing. It is not just about crossing a border anymore. It is about whether the country is becoming less open to their presence at all. And the next change made that fear even more personal, because it touched one of the most sensitive questions any immigrant family can face. What happens to their children's future? Number 7, the fear around birthright citizenship. Few things create panic faster than the fear that a child's future could suddenly become uncertain. For immigrant families in New York, this issue hits at the deepest emotional level possible. It is not just about policy. It is about babies, families, identity, and belonging. The moment people hear that birthright citizenship could be challenged, limited, or dragged into a legal battle, fear spreads instantly. Parents begin asking terrifying questions. Will my child still be protected? Will their status be questioned? Will the rules change after they are born? Even when the law is still being fought over in courts, the fear itself becomes very real. And in immigrant communities, that fear travels fast. What makes this issue so explosive is that it touches both the law and the heart at the same time. Families do not experience this as some distant constitutional argument. They experience it as sleepless nights, worried conversations, and silent panic about their children's future. A mother may wonder whether her newborn will truly have security. A father may fear that the country his child was born into could one day turn around and question that child's place in it. In New York, where so many families came to build a safer future for the next generation, this kind of uncertainty feels deeply personal. It shakes trust, creates confusion, and it makes people feel like even the most basic promises of stability are no longer guaranteed. And that is why this issue creates such a powerful emotional storm. It is not only about legal wording. It is about what it means to belong in America. When families start feeling that even their children's future could become part of a political fight, the panic becomes bigger than any one policy. It becomes a fear that the ground beneath them is no longer solid. And as intense as that is, the next change brought another wave of anxiety to New York, especially for one major community that suddenly found itself staring at the possibility of losing temporary protection. Number 8. The Haiti TPS termination scare. For thousands of Haitian immigrants in New York, the fear became intensely real when temporary protected status, or TPS, suddenly appeared to be in danger. TPS is not just a legal label. It is a shield. It gives people a chance to live, work, and breathe without the constant terror of immediate removal while their home country remains unsafe. So when talk of termination begins, panic spreads fast. In Haitian neighborhoods across New York, families start asking the worst possible questions. Will I lose my right to work? Will I be forced to leave? What happens to my children, my rent, my job, my entire life? That is what makes a TPS scare so powerful. It does not feel like a distant legal issue. It feels like an alarm going off inside the home. What makes this even more painful is that many Haitian families have already been carrying years of stress, instability, and uncertainty. They have built routines, found jobs, enrolled children in school, and tried to create some kind of normal life in a city that is already expensive and unforgiving. But when TPS protections suddenly appear fragile, everything starts to feel unstable again. Even when courts step in or temporary relief is granted, the emotional damage has already begun. People do not instantly relax just because one decision buys more time. The fear lingers. The confusion lingers. The sense that your future could be shaken by one government move never fully goes away. And that kind of fear can weigh heavily on an entire community. That is why the Haiti TPS scare hit New York so hard. It reminded immigrants that even temporary safety can feel temporary in the most frightening way possible. One legal threat can reopen old wounds, revive old fears, and make people feel like the life they built is balanced on a thin edge. For Haitian families, this was not just about paperwork. It was about dignity, survival, and the terrifying possibility of losing both overnight. And the next change made that fear even more immediate, because it threatened something every family depends on to survive in New York: the ability to keep working without interruption. Number 9. The end of automatic work permit extensions. For many immigrants in New York, the most terrifying part of the system is not always denial. Sometimes it is the gap. That silent, dangerous gap between one work permit expiring and the next one being approved. And when automatic extensions are reduced or taken away for many applicants, that gap suddenly becomes a real threat. People who were already working legally, paying taxes, supporting families, and trying to stay on track can find themselves thrown into panic almost overnight. One delayed renewal can now mean lost income, lost job opportunities, and a wave of fear that spreads through the entire household. In a city where missing even one rent payment can trigger a crisis, this kind of instability hits like a storm. What makes this so brutal is how fast normal life can start falling apart. A worker may have done everything right, filed on time, followed every rule, and still end up trapped in uncertainty because the system slows down or changes. Employers may not want to take risks. Hours may be cut. Jobs may disappear. Families begin counting every dollar, wondering how long they can survive if the paperwork does not come through in time. And emotionally, the damage is just as serious. Imagine waking up every day knowing you are ready to work, willing to work, desperate to work, but the legal protection that once gave you breathing room is no longer there. That kind of pressure can break a person's peace very quickly. And that is exactly why this change caused so much panic. It turned paperwork timing into a matter of survival. It made immigrants feel like even when they followed the rules, they could still be pushed to the edge by delays they could not control. In New York, where life moves fast and expenses never slow down, losing work authorization even for a short time can feel like watching your entire world begin to crack. But as frightening as this was, the next change made the fear even more visible, because it was no longer just about documents. It was about enforcement on the ground. Number 10. IC arrests and rising fear on the streets. Sometimes panic does not come from a new law being announced. Sometimes it comes from what people start seeing around them. More reports, more arrests, more stories passed from one family to another, one neighborhood to the next. And when IC activity feels like it is rising, fear spreads fast through immigrant communities in New York. Suddenly, normal routines no longer feel normal. A trip to work feels heavier. Dropping a child at school feels more stressful. Even opening the door, answering a phone call, or riding the subway can carry a quiet sense of dread. That is what makes enforcement so powerful. It does not just affect the people taken into the system. It affects everyone watching, everyone hearing the stories, and everyone wondering if they could be next. What makes this kind of fear so intense is that it changes the atmosphere of everyday life. People begin avoiding certain places. Families become more cautious. Some stop reporting problems, stop asking questions, or stop reaching out for help because they are afraid that any attention could bring danger. In a city as crowded and fast-moving as New York, that fear can hide in plain sight. It lives in whispered conversations, nervous glances, and emergency plans made late at night. And even for immigrants with some level of legal protection, rising enforcement can still trigger deep anxiety. Because when arrests become more visible, people stop thinking only about rules on paper. They start thinking about what can happen in real life on real streets without warning. And that is why this final change may be the most frightening of all. It turns fear into something people can feel around them, not just read about online. It makes the entire immigration debate feel immediate, personal, and dangerously close. For many New York immigrants, this is the moment when panic stops being a headline and becomes a daily reality. And now that we have gone through all 10 changes, the biggest question remains, what does all of this mean for the future of immigrant life in New York? When you step back and look at all 10 of these changes together, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is not just about politics anymore. It is about survival. For many immigrants in New York, life already feels like a daily balancing act between work, rent, family, paperwork, and fear of the unknown. And when travel bans tighten, work permits become less secure, asylum slows down, TPS protections shake, and IC enforcement feels more visible, that pressure becomes overwhelming. These changes do not stay inside government offices or legal documents. They enter kitchens, bedrooms, school runs, subway rides, and late-night family conversations. They change how people think, how they plan, and how safe they feel in the city they now call home. And that is why the story of Zoran Mamdani matters so much in this moment. Because for some people, he represents a line of defense, a leader who wants to push back and protect immigrant communities from harsher enforcement. For others, he represents conflict, tension, and uncertainty in an already heated political battle. But no matter where people stand on him, one thing is clear. New York immigrants are caught in the middle of something much bigger than one man. They are living through a moment where law, fear, power, and survival are colliding all at once. And when that happens, even one new policy, one legal threat, or one arrest can send panic racing through an entire community. So the biggest question now is not whether fear is real, it clearly is. The real question is what happens next. Will New York become a stronger shield for immigrants? Or will the pressure keep rising until more families feel trapped and afraid? That answer is still being written. But one thing is certain. For thousands of people, this fight is no longer distant. It is personal, it is urgent, and it is happening right now.